When I was younger, I used to go to a place called Desolation Wilderness near Camino, California. It was the perfect place for camping and fishing. Realizing that it had been a few years since my last trip, I talked to a friend of mine to go camping and fishing. We managed to talk another friend into coming with us, and then we were off. We arrived around 1 p.m. and decided to hike upstream from a place called Wright's Lake, and then, when we found a good spot, we would set up camp. After walking for a couple hours, a ranger found us hiking and told us that we actually weren't even technically in Desolation Wilderness yet, and that we needed to keep hiking for a bit longer. I started tearing down the camp, but I guess the other two guys were not as enthusiastic about the trip as I was. They left for Placerville to find a hotel room. When they left, I hiked up a bit farther, but I started to worry about the amount of time I had to find a place and set up my camp before dark. As I hiked, I tried to remember the ranger's instructions, but I ended up getting lost. Finally, I found a granite cliff with a stream that had a beautiful pool of water, and was right on the tree line. I thought it was perfect, so I set up camp and started fishing. When the sun had set and the sky was dark, I decided to go to sleep. Cozy in my sleeping bag, I started to drift off, but then I heard something growl outside my tent. I grabbed for my .45 compact handgun from its case and looked out through the screen on the front of the tent. From where I was standing, I could only see a dark figure that looked around 4.5 feet tall, standing right near the trees. Thinking it was a bear, I started yelling, hoping that it would scare it. Then I climbed out of my tent. The figure didn't move, so I fired my gun at a dead tree that was near it. That startled it, and it ran back into the forest. But to my surprise, it didn't go very far. Then all was quiet, so I climbed back into my tent. Then I heard crashing sounds. It was the sound of rocks falling off the cliff and hitting the pool below and the rocks around it. It was unnerving. I climbed out of my tent a few times, but I couldn't see anything even though the moon was bright and the white granite rocks reflected its paleness. Crashing rocks hit every few minutes until around 2 in the morning. Then it stopped, but I heard something rustling just outside my tent. I yelled at it and tried to scare it off, but instead of scaring it, I heard a very deep growl sound in return. At this point, I didn't want to wait until it got too close, so I got out of my tent and looked around. Nothing. I decided to shoot the tree again to see if the creature would react. It ran back into the forest again, just like the first time, but it stopped again. As I listened for the sounds of its moving, I realized that it was only running on 2 feet. Bears ran on all 4 legs. I turned white as a sheet. I didn't want to go back into my tent. I grabbed my sleeping bag and moved over to the middle of the big slab of white granite nearby. I felt safer knowing the forest was further away from me, but I could still hear the noises of rocks crashing. I prayed the sun would come up soon. Then, at about 4:30 in the morning, I was awoken from my light sleep. I looked back at the trees but didn't see anything, so I looked back over at my tent. There she was, standing at the side of my tent. I panicked and picked up my gun and shot the side of the creature, but it didn't flinch. With giant steps it walked toward me. I shot at it. I wasn't sure if a .45 would even stop such a beast, but it was my only hope. After the second shot rang out, it was off into the trees. Shaking like a leaf, I sat down clutching my gun. I waited for hours until the light started to appear in the sky. Then I broke camp and headed back down to Wright's Lake. That was the last time I saw the creature. That was the last time I went to the Desolation Wilderness, and I will never go back.